Storytelling. 1986. Buick Riviera. A touchscreen so early people rejected it. So brands retreated back to buttons. Fast forward past BMW's early iDrive era and something changes. The 2008 crash slams margins. LED panel prices nosedive. And by 2012, the Tesla Model S proves a near-buttonless interior is faster and cheaper to build. Then 2018 arrives. Backup cameras become mandatory, and a screen becomes standard hardware everywhere. This isn't a tale about innovation. It's a survival story. Keep watching, and I'll map the money trail that turned your climate knob into a submenu. The car beat the future by 2 decades and still got sent back to the past. Why did that early screen die while today's giants rule the dash? Meet the 1986 Buick Riviera's Graphic Control Center. It ran your radio, climate, and even basic diagnostics on a CRT, which looked like a home computer grafted into the dash. On paper, it sounded brilliant. One place to tweak fan speed, set presets, check alerts. In practice, owners met a flat panel with nested pages and tiny touch targets. Drivers prodded at functions with no tactile cue that a command landed. The thing felt clever until you were moving. Then it felt like homework. Confusion spread fast, warranty complaints followed, and the company dropped the idea for years because people simply didn't want to relearn their cars while driving. Fast forward to the early 2000s and luxury brands flirted with digital hubs again, but treated them like status flourishes, not replacements. BMW's first-gen iDrive stacked layers of menus around a rotary controller while keeping big, obvious climate knobs on the dash. Volvo tried pop-up displays that rose from the console, yet the core function still lived on rows of physical keys. The message was clear. Screens looked premium, but buttons still did the daily work. You got the new tech for navigation or settings, not to change temperature at 70 miles per hour. Here's where the instincts lined up with reality. Your hands remember shapes and resistance. A volume knob is a lighthouse. You can find it without looking, grip it, and turn to a familiar stop. Early Touch U is made you enter a scavenger hunt. Need defrost? Tap climate, then more. Then a tiny icon. Miss once on a bumpy road and you're back a screen. Without feedback through your fingertips, you floated. Human factors studies back that up. Researchers observed that drivers using physical controls spent shorter moments glancing away and made fewer input mistakes than those using early touch interfaces. The knobs let people operate by feel, so their eyes snapped back to the lane faster. Touch panels forced visual confirmation at each step, which stretched glance times and raised error rates when the road got rough. Automakers quietly acknowledged this in the way cabins looked from 2005 to 2010. You'd see 2 control layers in the same car. The faceplate hosted a dense grid of rockers, toggles, and dials for climate and audio. Then, perched above, the screen duplicated many of those functions in softer form. Hardware first, screen second. It was redundancy as a safety net. The buttons kept everyday actions quick, while the display handled maps and settings that could take a few steps. Then the economy yanked the wheel. When the 2008 crisis hit, margins thinned and inventory became a risk. Every extra switch meant a unique mold, a supplier slot, a wire harness tweak, and a new failure point for warranty. Multiply that by trims, languages, right and left-hand drive, and you get a parts bingo that strains cash when sales slow. Standardizing wasn't a trend, it was survival. So the question inside boardrooms shifted. What's cheaper to ship everywhere? A dozen bespoke button layouts per model, or a single display that can morph with software? If one panel plus code can serve base and premium cars, left-hand and right-hand markets, and 5 languages, that's a lever you pull when money is tight. Here's the first payoff. The Riviera faltered because the interface made drivers work. The recession introduced a new force, cost control, that could push past that resistance. Once spreadsheets favored screens, the center stack was never going to look the same again. And the curve that sealed it was simple. Panel prices slid fast while high-quality switchgear didn't. which set up the great swap that made your current dashboard feel sleek, yet cheaper to build. What if the big screen in your car actually cost less than the buttons it replaced? Here's how that became possible. Through the mid-2000s, flat panels went from premium electronics to everyday commodities. TV makers fought price wars, smartphone volumes exploded, and factories squeezed more displays out of the same lines with better yields. Each round of competition shaved dollars off per unit. Bigger panels got cheaper to cut, backlights got more efficient, and logistics moved whole pallets at lower cost. As consumer devices standardized around a handful of sizes and connectors, automakers could tap the same supply base at lower tiers. So the thing that once looked like an extravagant centerpiece became just another module. Now stack that against the hidden bill for good buttons. Every dedicated switch needs a mold, a matching bezel, a unique icon set, and a harness that routes power and signals exactly where that trim places it. Add regional differences, left-hand versus right-hand drive, language, safety symbols, and each variant spawns its own part number. Quality teams have to validate the click force, the detente, and the backlight uniformity. If a spring weakens or a contact corrodes, you don't push a patch. You eat a warranty claim and maybe a recall campaign. Those costs don't scale down gracefully when you multiply them across options and markets. This is where one panel plus software changes the math. Take climate controls alone. A base car might need a simple fan speed dial and a temperature rocker. A premium trim adds dual zone, seat heat, and a steering wheel heater. In the old world, that's 2 faceplates, different button counts, and unique wiring looms. With a global screen, the bezel stays the same in both cars. The base model ships with the climate page showing the basics. The premium model unlocks extra tiles and submenus in the same space, without adding hardware. That repeats for audio, navigation, and drive modes across North America, Europe, and Asia. One assembly, dozens of personalities. Some brands push this to the extreme. A large portrait display in the center stack let them collapse multiple modules into a single unit. Fewer physical controls meant fewer connectors, less copper in the harness, and a simpler build at the line. When the UI owns most functions, assembly workers route one cable and seat one screen. Trims differentiate through software packages and a couple of accent pieces, not a bin of unique buttons. Once the screen runs the show, it also acts like a router for features. Need a new tow mode? Add a tile and a logic map that ties into existing controllers. Want to lock adaptive cruise behind a subscription? Hide or reveal the control with a server flag. In the button era, a new function meant cutting a hole, sourcing a switch, and shipping different hardware to every plant. In the screen era, the feature lives as code, and the car checks whether it's allowed to display it. Consumer tech gave cover too. When drivers could mirror their phones, car makers got time to refine their own operating systems. The familiar icons took care of messaging and maps, and the in-house UI handled the vehicle stuff. That hybrid lowered the risk of ripping out hardware knobs because users already knew the playbook from their home screens.